Hello, everyone. Welcome to this evening's session. It will just wait for everyone to join for a couple of minutes and then we will get started. Okay, I think we will get started now. So thank you so much for coming along out tonight, everybody. My name is Karis. I'm the Outreach Officer here at Oriel College. So some of you may well have met me if I've come into your schools. But tonight we are doing our essay writing study skills session, which is also the Rex Nettleford Essay Prize support session. So as well as me this evening, it's not just me speaking. I am very happy to be joined by Abby Longway and Fleur Whitworth. So Fleur and Abby are both students at Oriel College. They're postgraduate students. Fleur is studying her MPhil in linguistics, philology, and phonetics, and Abby is studying her DPhil in English literature. Later on tonight, we are also going to be joined by Professor Nicholas Gaskill, who is a fellow at Oriel College, and he's also a tutor in American literature. He is also, kind of most importantly, and the reason he will be coming along later tonight, he is the organising academic of the Rex Nettleford Prize, so he'll be talking a little bit more later on about what the prize is, why we do it as a college. But before we get into it, just to break down what tonight is about. Tonight is not just kind of a cheat code about the Rex Nettleford Prize, how to win the competition, how to write the perfect essay. It's not like that at all. But what we're trying to set you up with tonight is some of the really crucial skills that you can do some independent research and do the work that will set you up really well for not just writing for a competition essay like the Rex Nettleford Prize. They're also going to be valuable skills for your A-level research, and they're going to be especially valuable if you are thinking about going on to university to do a humanities degree or any degree that is going to involve essay writing, because one of the big differences, as you might have heard before, between school and between university is having that level of independence where you've not necessarily got a set syllabus, you've not got exact work from the teacher that you have to do. This is about your freedom of choice, being able to decide what you're going to research, how you're going to go about researching it, and how you're going to structure your own work. So we are going to cover some of these study skills tonight. So firstly, we're going to look at how to begin researching an independent project. Where do you even start? How do you do good notes along the way? And then we're going to move a bit more into writing the essay. So some top tips for planning the essay and for things like how to write a really strong argument. After that, we are going to look a little bit more at the Rex Nettleford Prize. If you don't know exactly what that is at the moment, don't worry about it. You are in the absolute right place because we can explain that to you tonight. But we'll talk a bit about what Oriel College's Rex Nettleford Prize for Year 12 students is, how you can enter it, and then Abby and Fleur have also prepared a couple of brilliant sample essay plans about how they might approach the question to give you an idea about how you might want to go about doing that. Now, at the end of the session, we're also going to have some time for Q&A, but as well as that, there should be a Q&A box that you can see. And if you would like to put anything in the Q&A box, well, please do. We will answer any questions as and when we can. We'll answer some questions at the end. These questions aren't necessarily what should I write about in my essay, because that is not what we're here to tell you tonight. But if it's something about how should I, maybe what kind of resources should I use, or do you have any tips for this kind of study, or I learned this way, what do you think I should do? These are the kind of questions that we will be able to help you with best tonight. But anyway, enough from me. If that all sounds all right, without further ado, I will let Fleur begin on our first section of the evening, which is getting started on writing your essay. So Fleur, I will hand over to you.
Thank you, Karis. Hello, everyone. So I'm just going to talk you through getting started when you're not sure. Okay, right, I'd love to enter, but where do I begin? The main thing to bear in mind is that university essays greatly differ from school essays in the sense that they are less concerned with what you know. You're not just regurgitating information anymore. It's more about how you're constructing the argument and really making sure that you're answering the question, not putting down just what you want to write. Different disciplines have different expectations for essays, but no matter what you're writing about, it's important to carefully prepare. So we'll break it down into 4 sections. The 4th section, Abby is actually going to cover along with other things at the end. But I'll walk you through thinking about the question, finding the best resources, and keeping good notes when you're reading through all these different PDFs and books. So on to the next slide, please. So thinking about the question, my way of tackling any essay question is that I look at it and I think, okay, what are the keywords here? What's really making this question, as it were? And by attacking each key word, you're then making sure you've fully understood the question and knowing exactly what it's asking you to do. So take a look at the difference here between the critical words and the description words. You're going to tend to encounter more critical words with university essays, and that's really asking for your take on it. What we're saying about the regurgitating information, not just that, not just showing what you know, but what you really think of that. What's your analysis? Make sure that you choose a manageable focus area. You're not expected to say everything in the world on that topic. You are not Wikipedia. Choose which directions your thoughts take you, and that will be your unique angle and make you stand out. The best way to do this, to get all your thoughts down, is just brainstorm. Depth over breadth, go deeper, be critical of secondary sources, provide examples, tell us why that example is relevant. When you're writing the essay, you should really be speaking to the examiner, as it were, as if it were a peer that you're explaining something to. It really helps you explain everything in just the right amount and not overanalyze every term, but not just brush over it either. In order to guide your research, you can maybe ask yourself questions like, for the linguistics question this year for the prize, you could think about, okay, why were the policies created? What's the modern impact? All those 5 W's, all the what, why, etc. Yeah, so next slide, please. If it will come. Great, thank you. So now on to finding resources. We have here databases and journals, books and resources, credible online sources, and primary sources. As for the databases and journals, you're going to search with keywords using specific terms that relate to the essay question. So back to the linguistics question, you might search colonial language policy or linguistic hierarchies, for example. You can also use these things called Boolean operators, which means that you combine the keywords with like and or not in order to get more targeted results. You can also refine your searches via filters. You can narrow down the date, your subject area, or your language, and check the bibliographies. If you find a good book, have a look. Okay, what research did they look at? And that can send you on a trail that's perhaps a bit more direct than just individually searching every time. For the books and resources part, you can look at university reading lists, meaning you start with any list provided by schools, universities, or for specific modules. In library catalogs, bit old-fashioned, but you can use public or university library websites to search by a title, author, or subject. There's also reference works, and for interlibrary loans, that's a good point. You can not just limit yourself to your local library. You can actually sometimes request, say, if I was in Birmingham, and there's a book that's in a Warwick library. I'm pretty sure you can get it transferred across, which will help you out. With credible online sources, stick to sources like the British Library, UNESCO, or other government-backed organisations. That can always help make sure you're getting some credible sources. Document archives, search for digitised policy documents, reports, or manuscripts. You can evaluate the credibility by checking the authority, the purpose, or the date. And you can cross-check information. So getting the same piece of information from different sources just to check you really have got it right. As for primary sources, look for historical texts like speeches, essays, literary works. You can search specific collections as well, exploring databases specializing in colonial or post-colonial literature. You can also analyze the content, such as examining the author's background, purpose, and audience. And in order to integrate it into your argument, you can just follow the classic PE structure. And with your evidence, that can always be a primary source where you support your claims or highlight real world impacts. So if we go on to the picture slide. So here's some examples, as probably the hardest thing about answering these questions is knowing which example or case study to build the answer around. So these might spark some information and some inspiration for you in finding initial ideas that you can then research in more depth. Also, a very important point, please do not feel you have to pay to find good research. That is not the case. And if it were, that'd be a very unfair world indeed. So please just search for, if you find a book and it's saying you have to pay for it, just make sure you search for it on a different site, or choose a book with a similar title that might provide the same kind of information you'd also find. There's ways around it, and if you just do thorough searches, you'll be fine. So on to the next slide, please. So on to the third point, keeping good notes. My first thing to say about this is you need to work out if you're an auditory, kinesthetic, or visual learner. And the way that you take notes and even revise when it comes to exams is very much based on your type. For example, I am extremely visual, so I love to make notes that are visually pleasing and very well structured, because when it comes to actually writing the essay, I then like having everything, okay, I know where everything is going and I know which section it's in and I can see it and it's all fine. And I'm not going to panic or mess up my points that way. So I personally start off with a Word document, then each book I go through, I save the PDF, and on the PDF, I highlight using the highlight tool to highlight the most important parts that I've read. I then write them in my own words onto this Word document, and I will have the title, the book title, and then the bullet points underneath. And I will do this for each paper that I read. I then, once I have all these notes, I then have a general overview look and I think, okay, how could I best structure this essay that I can include the points I want to say? Again, remember, you're not expected to include everything in the world. And I keep some bits as quotes, direct quotes, but mostly it's reworded, A, to avoid plagiarism, and B, to make sure that it's in my voice. It's my understanding of the topic, and that's actually what's going to make you stand out. Now, after creating a copy of my let's call it a references document, I then may go through and separate the notes to make the different sections. Say if I'm creating 3 different sections for the body of the essay, and then I have that original copy I can reference back to, and I know, okay, so that bit of information came from that book. Okay, awesome, referenced, great. And so, yeah, that's essentially how I do it. There are other ways of doing it. You don't have to do it thematically. You don't have to go and highlight. But I think working out whether you're visual, auditory, or kinesthetic in terms of learning style, that will definitely help you work out how to most efficiently learn and write essays and just do everything that comes with academia. So now I'm going to pass on to Abby, who's going to take you through planning and writing the essay.
Thank you, Fleur. Hi, everyone. So as Fleur mentioned, in this section, I'll be going through some tips on how to write your essay. So thinking about how you might structure an essay of this style, I've included an example of what a structure might look like in terms of its sections at the bottom of the slide. So at the beginning, you'll need your introduction, and then you'll have what we call the main body of the essay, which is where you'll include various examples of supporting evidence, followed finally by your conclusion. So to break this down a little bit more, it's helpful to think about your argument before you begin writing your essay. And sometimes it's useful to do this before you begin planning where's going to go in which section of your essay too. And this is really important, especially before writing your introduction and your conclusion. And your argument is essentially what your essay is setting out to prove or what you're trying to find out over the course of the next however many words. So in your introduction, you should define any key terms and state your argument. So for example, you should consider the question that you're responding to and ensure that you're engaging with any key terms. So for example, if the question asks you to compare or to evaluate something, you should explain how you're going to do that in your essay. Or if the question includes keywords such as gender or motherhood, you might explain how you're going to interpret these keywords for your essay, so you're not leaving that open to interpretation. In the introduction, you should also just state your argument super clearly, and we sometimes call this a thesis statement, which is just a fancy way of saying that this is what you're going to argue in your essay. And it's essentially just a sentence or two which explains what you hope to explore. And it's really important to include this because it means that the reader is able to follow your argument throughout the essay. And the reader will also be looking for how you demonstrate this argument in the main body of your essay too. So in the main body, where you have your supporting evidence, you should divide your writing up normally into 3 or 4 supporting evidence paragraphs, but it can be more, it can be less. It depends how much you have to say for each point. And this is where you'll demonstrate what you have set out in your argument. So in each paragraph, there should be one main idea, which should be supported with examples and analysis. So an example of what this could look like is a sentence or two at the beginning of the paragraph, which states what the section is going to explore and how it relates to the argument. And this will be followed by a piece of evidence, such as a quotation or perhaps a material from a historical text or an image. And then this will be followed by a detailed explanation of what this evidence ultimately reveals about that key argument that you outlined in the introduction. And finally, you might end with a sentence that aims to link the point to the wider argument that you're presenting. So as Fleur mentioned, this might be referred to as your PEAL paragraph, your point evidence explained links that you use in school. And I can confirm that I still use this template for my university essays. So it's really helpful to kind of ground what you're saying to your argument. And so your conclusion should always be written last. And this ensures that the closing remarks that you give all relate to what you've written so far. And this is time to hammer home your argument. And a general rule of thumb is to try not to introduce any new ideas in your conclusion. So for example, you might avoid bringing in any new evidence to back up your argument. So try and keep this to the main body of your essay instead. So while in school exams, we often kind of find ourselves having to rush through our thoughts in an exam and kind of battle the conclusion under a time constraint, these longer essays actually give us a really great opportunity to reflect on our thoughts about the argument. So for example, you might reflect on what the reader should have learned by the end and how your essay could contribute to existing ideas and wider research. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I'll go through some tips for writing a clear argument in your essay. So just to go over this again, what is an argument? And so if we simplify this as much as possible, an argument is essentially a statement that you make to convince the reader to agree with your perspective. So think of it as asking a question, answering it, and explaining why your perspective is important. So for example, if a question gives you a statement and asks you, to what extent do you agree or disagree with it? your argument would need to clearly state why you agree or disagree. But don't feel you have to disagree with every part of the statement. You might agree with one part, but not the other, or vice versa. So while you might reference an opposing side of you, just keep ensuring that you argue why yours is the right one. You might say that this writer agrees with this statement, but their argument that this is correct, whereas their argument for this isn't quite developed enough. So you can kind of agree and disagree with people while keeping your overall argument the same. This is why it's important to examine the question really carefully. The most important thing is that you clearly outline your perspective and stick with it throughout the essay. And this will help to further justify why your perspective is a credible one. So perhaps you're telling a story or a perspective that hasn't been told or heard before. Perhaps you're arguing that there's a pattern in the language used in a set of texts, or that a certain author uses particular themes in their work to demonstrate something. So again, ensure that it's really clearly signposted in your introduction and in your supporting evidence paragraphs, and finally in the conclusion. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So what is a bibliography? It's actually quite a scary sounding word if it's something that you've not encountered before. And no one will have expected you to have encountered this before doing an essay like this. So we don't use these when we're writing essays such as exams, for example. But a bibliography is just a list of sources that a writer, such as yourselves, have used for a piece of research. They're often listed in alphabetical order, as you can see in the example on the right. And we use bibliographies for essays so that the reader can essentially see what research has informed your own essay, where certain thoughts and ideas might have been found, and also that they can see further details for text they might want to have a look at themselves too. But bibliographies are also so helpful for you as a writer of an essay, because they help you keep track of all of your research that you've been doing. Please, can I get the next slide? Thank you. So how to write a bibliography. So for essays of this style, you'll need to follow what we call a referencing system, which again sounds quite scary. Essentially a way of formatting your references in the bibliography and throughout your essay. So common referencing systems are MHRA, Harvard, MLA, APA, and again, they can seem quite a bit daunting and confusing in their acronym forms if you haven't used them before. So as you'll see in the orange bubble on the right of the slide, many university websites will often have reference system guides which show you how you would set out your references and give you tons of examples. And there's also a link to Oxford's resources for this on the Rex Nettleford website page. So if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of that page, you'll see a section called Study Skills and Referencing, which has 4 different links for you to take a look at. But for the competition, however, it doesn't matter which referencing system you use, just as long as it's a consistent one. And so for each reference in your bibliography, as you'll see on the right in the picture, they'll commonly include the author's name, the title of the material, where it was published, the publisher, and the year it was published. And you'll often find these bits of information at the beginning of a text, or sometimes a website might helpfully tell you all of this information for you. But the format of this can really vary. So for example, if you're using an online resource, you'd need to include the URL, so the link, and the date that you access the resource to. So this is the reason why you should keep good records of what you're reading and when, because it means that as soon as you get to this point, you have everything there for you to kind of take and put into your bibliography. Often your computer applications, so like Microsoft Word, or if you don't have access to this, Google Docs does the same. It can organize your list alphabetically for you using the References tab at the top of your document in the toolbar. And this is something that will just save you so much time when you come to put your final bibliography together. My final tip for bibliographies is to create it at the very start of your research. So this means you just have the accurate record of everything that you've used, saves you some admin, and you'll thank yourself later when you don't have to go on a wild goose chase for all the things that you've read so far over a month. Could I get the next slide, please, Karis? Thank you. So another element of referencing are footnotes, but these are not needed for the Rex Nettleford Prize, but you are free to use them if you'd like to use them. It's useful to cover what they are because they go hand in hand with your bibliography if you're writing an essay of this style. So footnotes are a way to signpost which text you've referenced throughout your writing. So for example, in the picture on the right, a quotation from a text is used. So at the end of a sentence, you would add the footnote, which explains which text the quote is from and which page the reader might find that on. The footnotes are found at the foot of the page, so at the bottom, and they follow the same structure as your bibliography references, except in the footnotes, the first name confusingly goes before the surname, but it's the opposite in the bibliography. And you can add footnotes using the reference tab again in your toolbar, and your software will automatically order these by number. Footnotes are just often used to add further notes for things you might need to clarify from the main body of your text, but these should be used sparingly if you're adding notes. They should just be to kind of reference quotations and where you found them. Great. And the final slide, please, Karis. Thank you. So adding the final touches to your essay, the first tip is that I find it really useful to think of what I call the proofreading rule of 3, which is to read your essay in your head once, to then read it out loud once, and then to read it in your head again. And it's tried and tested by myself because you're more likely to catch things when you have to read them out loud in your voice. And you kind of pick out things that you think, oh, why did I say that? Or let me just rephrase that. And it's a lot easier to kind of scan past those when you're reading. So yeah, it's just a useful thing to just catch out those final tweaks before you submit. Make sure to check any spelling, punctuation, and grammar mistakes, and also to check that your argument makes sense throughout your essay. So sometimes I find it useful to just go through the essay. I'll either print it out or use it on my computer, and just highlight like sections where I've referred back to my argument, because it just means that you can kind of really clearly see how much you've linked back to what you've set out in your introduction. Another element of good practice is to submit your essay in PDF format rather than as a Word document, so that all of your formatting stays in place. I think we've all been there where you submitted something as a Word doc and there's pictures flying across all the different pages. So PDF is the safest way to ensure that everything stays in place. And then a final big important tip is to reread any guidelines or requirements for the essay prize. So for the Rex Nettleford Prize, you might want to reread the following sections on the website before you submit. So this is the rules of the competition, the assessment criteria, and how to apply. So going back to that webpage and just kind of checking off each of the things to make sure that you've done everything you need to do before you press submit. And I will now pass back to Karis and Nick for some details on the prize. Thank you so much.
Lovely. Sorry, lovely. Thank you for that, Abby and Fleur. That is really, really helpful. And they're just, tips that we wanted to include just to try and give you kind of a sense of the very basic steps, which might seem maybe some of those seem a little bit too simple to you, but actually if you've got those strong foundations for your research skills and for your writing skills, it will make approaching something like the Rex Nettleford Prize that much easier. So I think we are just waiting for Nick to join us still. So I will get started on explaining what the Rex Nettleford Essay Prize is. It is our essay prize at Oriel College, writing on colonial history, open to current Year 12 students. It is open to all UK Year 12 students. So regardless of what school you go to, where from the country, it is open to all of you. Very excitingly this year, though, there are 2 prizes on offer for this competition, each of £250. But one of these prizes will be given to the highest placed essay from one of our link schools, which are the non-selective state schools in the 7 areas that I work with, which is Walsall, Wolverhampton, Dudley, Herefordshire. I'm sorry. It's a bit of a winter bug. Walsall, Wolverhampton, Dudley, Herefordshire, Worcestershire, Kensington and Chelsea, and Richmond upon Thames. And the nice thing about this prize is there is a lot of freedom in what you can choose to write about. It can be on colonial histories, and we have 4 questions, which I will show up in a second. But you can write on any kind of specific history of colonialism within that you choose, and you can approach it from any academic discipline as well. The only criteria is it can't be something you're doing on your school curriculum at the moment. So it's got to be something that you've chosen, you've sought out proactively, you've done that research on independently. And the prizes for this essay get awarded at a very prestigious lecture that takes place at Oriel College, and this is the annual Rex Nettleford lecture. It happens in May, and we always get very prestigious speakers in to come and talk about colonial histories. So you can see here this picture of our winners from a couple of years ago. We've got Professor Nick Gaskell on the left, we've got our head of college on the right. It's a really lovely occasion, and you get to see inside an Oxford College, bring family member, and I think you get to go to a nice dinner in our dining hall as well. So to show you what this year's questions are, it's the following 4 questions. So you have to answer one of these questions, only one of them, no need to answer more than that, it's just the one. And you can look in terms of any historical period, geographical centre and cultural range, because we appreciate colonialism is a very, very broad topic. It's not like there's just one narrative within that. So first question is, how have language policies implemented during colonial rule influenced contemporary linguistic hierarchies, cultural identities, or literatures? Discuss specific examples. Then the second question is, what can attention to gender reveal about the functioning of colonialism and or its legacies? Discuss specific examples. Thirdly, should religious groups apologise for converting Indigenous peoples from traditional belief systems? And then finally, pick a particular narrative of colonialism and analyse its effects as a narrative. So, for instance, you might consider the way your chosen narrative distributes attention, what does it foreground and how, or how it shapes the ways people understand the legacies of colonialism today, including how to remember and or address those legacies. Potential narratives could include a historical story told about colonialism, or a novelistic, poetic, or cinematic depiction of colonialism and or its legacies. So you can see there, we've got some really, really broad questions. If we have any questions about that, if we could pop them in the Q&A box, that would be the best way for us to get around to answering them. You should be able to find that and we will get to you in the chat. But so we've got some really broad questions there, and you can see there's a couple of key things throughout. So firstly, discuss specific examples. That's a big one for answering all of the questions. You need to have found an example that you can ground your argument in, rather than talking very hypothetically about some kind of general colonial history. You want to be able to base what you're talking about in some sort of history. And on that, I believe we've been joined by Professor Nicholas Gaskell. Hi, Nick. It's really lovely to have you here this evening.
Hi, let's see. Sorry, let me get my video working.
That's
There
all right.
we go.
Hello.
Oh, wait, am I blurred?
You're a little bit blurry, yeah.
Oh, there I am.
Yeah, you're back.
The
Lovely.
algorithm has found the human. Hello.
All right, hello. So Nick, we've covered on the general study skills, and I've just briefly introduced what the Rex Nettleford Prize is, but I was wondering if you could just briefly tell us a bit more in your words, what's the competition? Why do we do it at Oriel College? A bit of that'd be great, thank you.
Yeah, so the competition is an essay competition that its main purpose is to give students an opportunity to engage with an ongoing and really important debate about the legacies of colonialism in general. And the prize was founded to encourage students to think about this in secondary school and to do some independent thinking and research about these really pressing political, historical, and cultural questions. And you can see from the general nature of the prompts, and also that they really are meant to give you a lot of scope to explore what you're interested in here. But as for the purpose of the competition, it really is just that, to give you an opportunity and some encouragement to think about the legacies of colonialism.
Lovely, thank you. And you will be in charge, or directing some of the markers for this competition. Can you give some of our Year 12s maybe some advice on what you would be looking for when you're looking at these essays to make a really standout entry to the competition?
Sure. So one thing I'll say straight away is that these prompts were developed by the faculty at Oriel College, but they weren't written necessarily by the people who will mark the essays. And this is a good thing, because what this means is that this is a way of assuring you that there is not some one set right answer, because whoever wrote the prompt and may have had some idea of what an answer could be won't be marking your essay. So trust me when I say there are lots of paths to a successful essay here. As for what a good essay looks like, we want to see an essay that shows that you are thinking about a topic in a way that is bringing you deeper into the questions that you've asked, that's giving you a firmer grasp on the material. So what this means in practice is, you might think about ways of getting your essay to pose a question related to the prompt, and that then shows the way that you have thought through this and come to an argument. But, I also know, because I've looked through the slides of this PowerPoint, that we've got some really excellent advice that has already been given or is about to be given.
We've done kind of the study skills bit already. We're going to go through the essay plans in a second.
Yeah. So I don't actually want to say too much, because I know that there's really excellent concrete advice coming up. But here's one bit of advice. Successful essays have often been revised a couple of times. So, you'll draft the way that you think, your initial way of organizing the essay, but it's really in the sculpting of it after you've got a draft, where you're really trying to bring out what are the key points, how do they fit together. That's when you're able to really make everything coherent and put aside the points that aren't as relevant in the end, and really big up the points that are your best points, strengthen the transitions. I can't praise enough the benefits of revision and going back to your essay and doing a second or a third draft.
Oh, brilliant. So you heard it there, guys. 3 key points. Don't be afraid to approach the question from whatever angle you choose. There's no right answer. Make sure to practice it, and there's no harm in changing it, even if you doesn't quite finish the same way as you started it, and just have a good go. Oh, thank you, Nick. There's some really helpful key points. And I suppose a great place to move on to there is how Abby and Fleur have both decided to approach their kind of hypothetical plans. So who's first? Lovely. So Fleur, would you like to talk us through how you thought about approaching the question with the question that you chose?
I can. So given that I study linguistics for my master's, and for undergrad I did languages, I was naturally drawn to the linguistics question. Essentially I'll read it out and then we'll go through it and how you tackle it, and then Abby will go through her lovely plans. And you might find that we say different things. There is no right way of doing it. It's just how you learn, how you process. You should never compare your learning style to someone else's. It's your unique voice that will shine through depending on how you deal with the essay. So how have language policies implemented during colonial rule influenced contemporary linguistic hierarchies, cultural identities, or literatures? Discuss specific examples. Now, you're looking at that, you're thinking, oh my Christ, there's a lot of words in there. So let's break it down. Let's define the key terms. Let's look at, okay, what can we see here? Language policies. Then what's coming up next? Okay, colonial rule. Okay. Then we've got linguistic hierarchies, cultural identities, or literatures. We've got the key terms here, But before I get into those, just bear in mind that it says here linguistic hierarchies, cultural identities, or literatures. You do not have to cover all three in one essay. I mean, you can if you'd find that your essay plan would work really well covering all three. If you want to do that, go forth and do that. But if you just want to focus on one specific bit, just like, oh, linguistic hierarchies really interest me, then do that. Personally, I find that bit the most interesting, because I look at minoritized languages in France, and so I would obviously, unrelated to colonialism here, like say in a separate essay just about linguistic hierarchies, I'd be quite interested by that. So pick out what really catches your eye. Make sure that whatever essay you choose is linked to colonial rule, colonialism, post-colonialism, because that is what this prize is all about. If we're looking at language policies, that tends to be how language is regulated by a state, or it tends to be government-led. However, you can look into how different groups pressure certain ideologies. With linguistic hierarchies, that just means valuing or putting one language above another as saying what is proper or correct, or politically acceptable, etc. Cultural identities, pretty self-explanatory, and literatures, obviously we're looking at different works of literature that were produced. Provide context, briefly explain how colonial powers implemented language policies to control populations or promote their own cultures. Really dive into the topic and get a good comprehensive view of all the different angles it could go, and then think, oh, okay, right, how am I going to make my essay stand out? How am I going to take an angle that maybe someone else wouldn't think of? The most important thing with your introduction is really, like start off with a very impactful introduction, like catch the examiner's attention, because that's what's going to make them think, oh yeah, I'm quite interested in this essay, I'd like to keep reading more. That's something that I learned it in A-level, and I've kept working on it throughout my undergrad and postgrad. A good introduction will just get you places. So please, whether it's for an essay, whether it's for your personal statement, I know they're changing how they're doing those at the moment, but a good introduction is key. So really spend time on it. State your argument, highlight the specific focus of your essay. I put a little example there about what your focus could be, but again, take whatever angle you would like to follow. Don't be a perfectionist. Going with the whole thing about drafts, don't be afraid to just start, because at least you're starting, at least you're not, like, failing is not even trying. So please just give it a go. And we'll go on to the next slide just so you can see how I'd structure the body and the conclusion, please. Thank you. So a detailed plan is key, and don't get lost in a thesaurus. What I mean by that is make sure you work out exactly what you're going to cover first, then expand upon it using all the techniques and tips that myself and Abby have just provided you with, and then don't replace content with just fancy long words because you think that will make you sound like better or that your essay will flow more. It actually won't. A complex idea explained simply is going to be much better than a simple idea explained in a more complicated manner. So yeah, going back to the thing about explain all of your thought process and your points as if you were trying to explain it to a friend. That really helps me be a bit more clear with my argument. So enough of the rant. To the body of the essay. I've decided to tackle all three because I thought, oh, maybe that's the angle I want to take. Again, I could have just focused on section 1, 2, or 3, but expanded them in 3 different sections, okay? The body of the essay should be about 2,000 words. and I divided my sections because I wanted language policies to have a bit of a bigger focus. So I've put 800 words there. I would love to tell you what I would include in them. However, that would be writing your essay for you. So I'm not going to do that. But like I've just said, here, these are different sections, but could equally serve as different approaches to one singular essay. With your conclusion, you want to almost be like answering your introduction. So we're summarizing all the key arguments. We're making sure we have answered every part of the question. And we're restating how colonial language policy has shaped contemporary linguistics hierarchies, all cultural identities, all literatures, or all three. Okay. You may then want to discuss broader implications, like the importance of preserving linguistic diversity. What's the relevance nowadays? What are we seeing? And really go out with a bang, end with a thought-provoking statement or question about the future of linguistic identities. Really make sure, I've probably said this like 10 times now, but your voice shines through, and you'll definitely produce an essay that is not only worth reading, but one that you're very proud of. So Abby, I think, is going to take us through another essay plan that you could follow.
Sorry, Abby, before you get going, could I just say a couple of things that that wonderful presentation just reminded me of, and then I'm actually going to have to run. But Karis, could you go back to the prompts for a second, please?
Yeah, just give me a second. I will be.
So one thing, I'm hoping that I'm remembering this correctly. Yes. Okay. So let's look at how the first two end. So discuss specific examples. That's repeated in the first one and the second one. And then in the fourth one, it says pick a particular narrative of colonialism and analyze its effects as a narrative. So one thing that the prompts are designed to prevent you from doing is get really general, to say something so big and general that it's impossible to say anything intelligible in the word count that you have. You don't have that many words. So you actually have to, it feels like a lot, but it's actually not a lot. So you need to figure out a way to like get a tight enough focus that you can really think about your topic. And just, I wanted to flag the way that the prompts are sort of encouraging you to get specific. And that can take lots of different forms. Sometimes that could mean like picking a particular object that you want to think with, or a particular approach to a topic, but it sort of depends on what discipline you're in. Specificity looks different in history and philosophy and literature, and so you have to think about how that works. But beware as you're writing of suddenly biting off more than you can chew in 2,000 plus words. So sorry, I just wanted to flag that as a piece of I think crucial advice, and then echo a lot of what Fleur just said, and what it sounds like you guys covered earlier about thinking about it as explaining your ideas to a friend. So these are all excellent bits of advice. And I'm afraid I have to run, but good luck, everybody. Have fun with this. Readers of essays can always tell if somebody is kind of like really thinking and having fun when they're writing this essay, as opposed to doing it because they have to. So luckily you don't have to do this. So hopefully you will be having fun and doing some real thinking. So
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Nick, for coming to join us. Really appreciate your time. Lovely. Right, we will jump back through to where we were.
Yeah, there were a few helpful books.
Yes, we've got your recommended book list. Where is it?
Next slide, please.
There we go.
Yes. So there you have some books that might help you if the language policy question has caught your eye. But if not, fear not. There are 3 other ones, and Abby is going to run you through one of them now.
Thanks, Fleur. That was so helpful. And I actually jotted down some things for myself, for my own work. It was so useful. So I, as a literature student, chose the gender question because a lot of my research over the past few years has been to do with literature and gender. So I was drawn to this one. So this question was, what can attention to gender reveal about the functioning of colonialism and slash or its legacies? And discuss specific examples. And so kind of similarly to how Fleur approach this question, I really like to kind of break down all of the keywords from the question and really unpack what the question is asking me to do. So the first thing I would do when I see a question like this is kind of highlight each word a different color. If you couldn't tell by my slides, I love color coding things. So this is like my key thing to kind of separate things out for myself. So unpacking all of these, I started with attention, and often I'll Google what the definition of a word might be, or I'll think of it from the top of my own head. But it can just really help sometimes to get a second opinion on what other people think this word means, and then write out the definition next to the word. And every keyword that you think there is in the title, write a definition. Even if you think it sounds really simple, it's good to kind of explore what other people might think gender means, or that what the functioning of colonialism might mean, and just have those kind of in a list and think about the approach that you'd like to take with those keywords. And also thinking about the terms in this way can help ensure that you approach the question super concisely and that you're answering all of the elements of the question. So as Nick and Fleur mentioned before, the kind of hook of this question is discuss specific examples. So again, thinking about specific examples and the definition of that being sources or quotations that are going to prove your argument. And then the keywords above that will help feed into which examples you choose and how you are going to kind of formulate that argument. So just to go through the definitions in this question, attention, I would define as thinking about something carefully. So you think carefully about what you're going to propose in your argument. Gender, you'd think very broadly about how you're going to define gender in the essay, but you might collect kind of some text from theorists or different parts of literature or history texts to formulate that definition of gender. Reveal, what can it tell us? The function of colonialism, how does it work? What legacies does it leave? And how are legacies of colonialism created? And again, in your introduction, make sure to unpack those keywords and explain how you're going to interpret them. So that would be my first thing to do. And then I'll run through my second slide. I know we're a bit short on time, so I'll just quickly go through how I would kind of tackle the essay from here. So what I've always done since A-levels is when I'm planning an essay, I will start with like really simple paragraph headings. So I've given some examples in the colored boxes here. So I'll often kind of lay out my argument and then I'll say, okay, I'm going to do 5 paragraphs. One's my introduction, one's my conclusion. This is how I'm going to start it. And I'll always make it sound a bit snazzier in the final version. But I find it's really helpful to kind of have a really simple heading of like, the writer of this novel uses the theme of motherhood to highlight the colonial legacies of, and then I can go and jazz that up after, but I know exactly what I kind of want to say with that paragraph. So that's always like my key tip for writing an essay like this. And as Fleur mentioned, make your intro super powerful. Like when you are reading an essay as an examiner or as someone who's just reading a friend's essay, if you read a good introduction, you are hooked in for the rest of the essay. Like it's super important. And it's a really simple way of kind of making sure that you kind of retain interest throughout the person reading your essay. So some top tips for the introduction are to use it to tell the reader what your focus is, outline any key context, such as the historical context, theoretical context, or the literary text that you're going to be using. And then I think there's another slide behind. Oh, magic. Thank you. And then some other top tips for the conclusion are to kind of reiterate your argument without repeating phrasing used in the introduction. Reflect on what you've revealed. So, for example, in the sample text at the side, I've said the representation of motherhood in the text not only conveys this, but also the impacts that this had on this and the legacies of colonialism. So you might kind of phrase it in that way really clearly and recapitulate that argument, make sure that you're kind of hammering home what you're trying to say throughout the essay. And then at the end, you might kind of open this up for wider discussion and say, how does gender play into other genres of literature or theories which respond to the topic of colonialism? And this shows that you've gone the extra mile to do some research into the topic and will help set your essay apart from others in the same area. I think that's all from me. And I think there's a slide on helpful books as well, which feel free to just take a screenshot of. You can find a lot of these just by plugging them into Google. There's sources like archive.org that Fleur mentioned briefly before that can, you can just search them in and most of them will be on there. But feel free to just have a Google and you should find them. And I'll hand back to Caris. Thank you.
Yes, lovely, thank you. And yeah, just to reiterate, all of the books that have been referenced in this PowerPoint are available online completely free. It might be the case in some of them that there's only some of the chapters that are available rather than the whole book. Particularly Internet Archive has a lot of them on there. Google Books has a lot of bits as well. Didn't want to signpost you to anything tonight that you couldn't access for free. So these are good things to take away. And also, if you are you're interested in learning, even if they're not the sources that you want to use to write your Rex Nettleford thing, hopefully these are good things you can do as supercurricular research if you are thinking about a competitive university application for the next year of university. Then this might be good things to be reading in your own time, just to be pushing yourself a little bit further. Lovely. So thank you so much for coming along this evening. But before we wrap up, I have to do the very boring administrative part of the competition, because all of the competition entries, I have the absolute pleasure of administering them and making sure they go to the right people. But to do that, I need your help effectively to make sure that everything gets processed properly. So how to enter the Rex Nettleford Prize? These are the slightly boring T's and C's. So essays must be no longer than 2,500 words. Thank you for whoever asked in the comments. Is there a kind of leeway over that? No, we would really, really like your essays to be no longer than 2,500 words. This word count does not include your bibliography, which you do need to include, and that needs to be at the end of your essay. But your bibliography can be whatever length it needs to be. It's just the body of your essay can't be over 2,500 words. And then as well, at the start of your essay, you need to indicate what academic discipline you've chosen. Great thing about this competition, you can write from any academic discipline, brilliant, except for when it comes to me distributing those essays to the markers and I don't know what subject you've written from. So please make sure at the head of your essay, it says history, philosophy, economics, whatever that needs to be. Don't use smaller than a size 12 font just because it's not nice to read, and margins no smaller than 2.54 centimetres. When you have completed your essay, brilliant, well done. Please email it to me at outreach@oriel.ox.ac.uk, and you must email your essays with a completed entry form. So the entry form is really, really important because it means I'm able to know who you are, know what to inform you if you've won, which is quite important, you want to know. And on that entry form, it's kind of your name, your personal details, your school, which is extra important for knowing which prizes you're eligible for. Again, your academic discipline of submission. There's also a candidate declaration from you to say that this was your original work. And there's also a declaration from your teacher to prove that your teacher's saying that they didn't aid you in doing it, that you've done the work independently. That's an important one to just keep an eye on, because the deadline for submission is in February half term. It is on the Friday, so it's Friday the 21st of February at 10 a.m. So if you've left it to the last week to get your teacher declaration, you might have a problem because your teachers will also be on half term. So it's really important to bear in mind, think ahead to make sure you're getting your teacher declaration for your entry form sorted. So when you send that email, please just send the header as Nettleford Prize. That makes it really easy for me to sort through. And really important, please send your entry form and your essay as PDFs. I can't open cloud attachments, and if you are submitting it in the wrong file, unfortunately, I can't guarantee it will be considered. That's the same if I get an essay without an entry form. I can't guarantee it will be considered. The entry form can be found to download on our website on that Rex Nettleford page. And as Abby mentioned, we've also got some extra resources on there now to get you started, whether that be journals that you can search online for free, or that's tips on how to do bibliographies. So thank you so much. If you have any further questions, we will stay on for a couple of minutes now and try to answer a few more in the chat. We can talk them through as well. If you kind of want to shoot off now, that's completely okay, but we will hang on for a few more minutes. If you have any further questions that you want to follow up afterwards with, my email address is outreach@Oriel. Please do email me. More information about the competition is on our Oriel website. And please do follow us on social media. We are hoping to share this. You will get a shared recording of this with you early next week, so you can kind of go back through the slides. And then we're hoping to share this on YouTube at a slightly later date.